Nobody listened, no matter how many times experts warned humanity about climate change. By 2019, a succession of storms, tornadoes, floods, and droughts had caused widespread devastation. The globe, with the loss of major cities, international leaders banded together, led by the United States, discovered a means to neutralize the storms via a network of thousands of satellites. Each is employing countermeasures aimed at influencing the fundamental aspects of weather. Jake, the principal architect, built the Dutch Boy satellite network. For the time being, was a U.S.-owned company, but Dutch Boy would be transferred to an international company in 3 years. Counsel: Jake is summoned to a disciplinary hearing before a U.S. Senate subcommittee one day because he punched a federal investigator and uploaded Dutch Boy without permission. Jacob refuses to accept, scolding and responds with sarcasm, disregarding emails from his brother Max requesting to get him to quit. Jake explains that he assaulted the cop because he insisted on handling machine parts that almost killed him, and that he used the Dutch Boy to halt a series of storms that nearly killed him. Thousands of people would have been slaughtered. The Senate is unconcerned. All they want is for Jake to be submissive. So they decide to send fresh personnel to the station to keep an eye on things, and Jake is one of them. Some of the former team members will have to be let go. Following the meeting, Jake runs into Max, who reports to the U.S. Secretary of State. Max has been appointed as the manager of Dutch Boy. Jake has opted to be fired because he believes it is the best thing for the project. Jacob is heartbroken. He learns that his brother can do this to his family and never speaks to him again. After 3 years, a UN team stationed in Afghanistan receives some strange readings on its scanners and travels to investigate a neighboring settlement. To their surprise, the entire area has frozen over and the inhabitants have died. An audio recording of this discovery is relayed to U.S. President Palma and his staff, who agree that it must be kept secret for the time being. Now, there is proof that Dutch Boy is to blame, yet legislators are unwilling to shut it down because the press will quickly pounce on it to find out what's causing it. Max suggests sending someone in order to investigate the issue. Secretary of State Deckham advises him to recruit Jake for the job. Regardless of how much Max despises his brother, Jake is still the most knowledgeable about the station. Meanwhile, the satellite in charge of Afghanistan returns to the Dutch Boy. Be checked on. Engineer Habib discovers an unusual date on the hard drive and decides to create a duplicate, something he keeps hidden in his locker. He then tries to return to work, but as he walks into an empty office, the doors abruptly lock themselves around him, and the pane's shattered. Habib has been expelled from space and then dies. The next day, Max pays a visit to Jake, who has relocated to Florida following his divorce, and sees his daughter Hannah twice a month. Jake does not want to see Max and attempts to avoid him away, but Max informs him about Afghanistan and the airlock catastrophe and invites him to rejoin the group project. When Jake declines, Max changes his mind by pointing out that his innovation is killing people. Long later, he logs into the system in the Pacific Climate Council's Hong Kong offices. He senses something strange about the situation in Afghanistan, so he attempts to contact Max to warn him, only to be greeted with voicemail. He then goes to the market to acquire some food, noticing, how hot is it? In fact, the heat is so intense that a cat is attempting to stay inside the market refrigerator. Long's eggs cook on the pavement when he drops them by mistake. Suddenly, the ground begins to shake. Long observes the flames whirling and destroying the streets as they shake. He flees in his automobile right away, driving around all the panicked individuals, and the buildings that were constantly collapsing. Long does not exist. Stop until he reaches the road outside of town and the temperature drops, indicating he's out of danger. When he turns back, he finds Hong Kong in ruins. When Jake is ready, Hannah sobs because she believes Jake will not return, and he has always been difficult to count on. Yet, Jake says he'll be back. Jacob is boarding a shuttle and traveling to the Dutch Boy moments later. Feeling at ease in space, he runs the station under Commander Fassbinder, the station's principal scientist, and she introduces him to her primary staff, which comprises Security Officer Dissett and System Administrator. Duncan is a consultant. They believe the tragedy in Hong Kong was caused by a gas explosion, since that is what, according to the news, Jake is certain it was caused by the same entity that froze the village. Meanwhile, on Earth, Max is spending time with Sarah, the president's lover. The Secret Service, they are interrupted by a phone call from Long, who informs Max about the heat he experienced before the event occurred, indicating that it was not a gas pipe. He attempted to contact the Dutch Boy to validate his idea, but his account has been disabled, and Max sees that his has as well. The government, is concealing a system flaw that has the potential to create a geostorm. It consists of global catastrophic weather events occurring at the same time. Max, he pledges to check into it, and after disconnecting, he discovers Sarah has been summoned to work because the president has chosen to hold a last-minute news conference, which appears to be fairly abrupt. When the power goes out in the workplace, Long continues to try to log in. He hears noises coming from elsewhere. Long watches as American agents take away his computer and flee to hide in the corridor. Every piece of paper he had Jake learns in the Dutch boy that the Afghanistan logs were wiped clean but malfunction. As a result, he directs the crew to examine the records of the other satellites in order to monitor any anomalies. Symptoms of corruption. The following day, Max pays a visit to his buddy Dana, a cybersecurity specialist. Works for the government's information technology department. He requests that she investigate the banning of the accounts. Dana verifies that this was made to appear to be part of a problem, yet it was clearly deliberate. Jake has a video meeting with Max and the Dutch boy. Someone warns him that the incidents may have included foul play. Jake is overjoyed. Max permits him to get the Hong since he knew the Dutch boy was well built. The Kong satellite. This sparks a debate because Jake believes he does not require Max's consent to do so, accomplish anything, and Max tells him that he is constantly cleaning up after Jake's stupid blunders. After their parents died, he's sick of taking care of his brother, so if Jake doesn't, he'll be fired again if he doesn't behave. The Hong Kong satellite arrives at the station, but then it disappears. The robot arm that grabs it gets insane and starts shaking around, causing damage to a section of the hangar. The satellite was destroyed. The fall completely destroys the satellite, and the team must rebuild it, recover the few bits that survived. Sadly, the mishap caused an electrical short and fried everything. Jake believes they don't have any evidence of corruption to evaluate because they've wiped all the drives. Dissette, on the other hand, informs him that he has been watching the footage of Habib's death and has uncovered something. The panels that erupted contain drives, and one of them became entangled in the connection tower. Jake and Fassbinder proceed on a spacewalk to collect the panel, but Jake becomes ill. He loses control of his motions when his suit malfunctions. He falls as a result of the shaking. The panel and collides with the station, so he ejects his jetpack and manages to hang on a cable to keep it from drifting away. Fassbinder leads him back inside a few moments later, and Jake says that he removed the disk from the panel before letting go. When the crew comes to check on them, Jake doesn't tell them about the drive because he believes one of them destroyed his outfit. Following that, he and Fassbinder analyze the drive and uncover no evidence of wrongdoing. This demonstrates that the so-called accidents were caused on purpose. Jake wants to locate the login information hidden behind this code, but he is shut out. In the interim, Long arrives in Washington, D.C., and agrees to meet Max and Sarah in a cafe. When it comes to Long, though, to cross the street, he is shoved in front of a car and severely injured. The enigmatic guy flees in. Sarah tries to catch up to him in his own car, but she is too slow. Max rushes over to Long's side and hears him repeat the word Zeus before passing away. A few hours later, Max receives a phone call from Jake. He claims it's an emergency, so take it. Jake, on the other hand, merely wishes to apologize. Before narrating the entire story, Max tells Max that there is an unsaid code between brothers. They went fishing with their father that day. Max notices his intentions and goes to visit him. Dana to play a tape of Jake's narrative for her. Dana doesn't see why this is an urgent matter. Max says that they never went fishing as children. Jake is attempting to send a message. He uses code because he believes he is being watched. Max offers Dana the code they used when they were youngsters, and Dana uses it. Assembles different video segments to create the true message, evidence of sabotage. No one should be trusted at the highest levels of government. Max then requests that Dana investigate Project Zeus. When Dana discovers a file in a White House security network that is doubly encrypted, which isn't hackable, she will need the proper credentials to shatter it. Sarah arrives home moments later and discovers indicators that someone has broken in. She pulls out her gun, only to learn that it is Max and Dana who do not want her to. They don't want anyone to know they're there. Max requests Sarah's credentials in order to steal the information. Sarah first refuses since it would violate her oath, but she changes her mind when Max emphasizes that he is requesting something so severe because it is incredibly vital. Back at the Dutch boy, Jake and Fassbinder examine the surveillance cameras and find Habib. He had something hidden in his locker. Nevertheless, when they check it out, they discover that the locker is empty. Suddenly, Dissette comes, brandishing his rifle at them, and because he does not shoot them right away, Jacob comprehends Dissette is also curious about who murdered Habib. After checking that everyone is on board, Dissette admits that Habib's belongings are in a separate locker on the same side. He explains that he witnessed them. He also had security cameras and said nothing since he believed the offender would disclose themselves through them. Coming to demolish the goods, the trio accesses the correct locker and discovers a duplicate of the drive. This shows that a virus has been implanted in the station's system. In the meantime, Sarah offers Dana her login details, which enabled her to locate the files on Project Zeus. She discovers a series of simulations that culminate in geostorms, and Max discovers that the simulations were used to create the storms. For real, Max then video calls Jake to alert him that someone is weaponizing the Dutch boy. Jake reveals that they are attacking certain cities using the virus. He must shut down the Dutch boy momentarily so that a reboot can flush out the malware. Max gives his approval, but there's a catch. The only person who possesses the kill codes is the president, and Jake isn't one of them. Palma is not trusted. Only someone with authority may disable their accounts. It's also no coincidence that the US must transfer authority over Dutch boy to the International Council in 3 weeks. Max inquires about Jake. Should keep a watch on the satellites while he figures out how to get the kill codes. Some hours later, President Palma will attend a national conference in Orlando. Max walks up to Sarah in secret and persuades her that the plot is genuine, thus she must assist him in stealing the codes. To proceed, Max also informs his superiors that he's going to see his father, who lives in Florida. During that time, the Dutch boy receives alerts that 200 satellites are failing. The majority of them are on the verge of failing. The implications are immediately visible on Earth. A tremendous hailstorm breaks out. An offshore cold snap destroys half of Rio de Janeiro and hits Tokyo. Because he is still unable to close, Jake chooses to launch the spare satellites to replace the ones that are destroying the station. All throughout the world, they replace the one in Rio de Janeiro before the rest of the world. The city also collapses. But at the same time, another alarm arrives. A geostorm is brewing. On the planet, Max hears about the calamity and receives an alert on his iPad. Finding the storm is scheduled to visit Florida next. Deckham approaches him and informs him that Max's father is no longer alive and is eager to learn the truth. Max informs him that the president is orchestrating an impending geostorm. Nevertheless, Deckham has terrible news. They are unable to obtain the codes from Palma due to the president's absence. Here is the code. To initiate the shutdown, they need his fingerprints and his eyeballs. As a result, they are forced to try to reason with him. The Dutch boy team was present at the time, is taken aback to learn that the station had started the self-destruct procedure on its own. They make an attempt to override the directive, but they are denied by the system, and Jake understands he is the only one who can. Duncan has the knowledge to achieve this, as the station explodes one part at a time. Before confronting Duncan, Jake instructs the staff to flee. He discovers him still on the computers and starts beating him up, but Duncan has a revolver concealed beneath his desk and uses it to protect himself. Get Jake away from him. Duncan then acknowledges that he did install the malware and that he accepted the risk. Because his software engineer salary is ludicrous, he received a corrupt payoff from the government. He also admits to wanting to watch the world burn. Jake rushes to disarm Duncan and beat him up again, but Duncan retrieves the rifle and unintentionally fires at a window during the scuffle. When Duncan is flung into space, Jake goes into another room and closes the door. Back in Florida, Deckham brings Max into a secret chamber, claiming that they will meet with the president there. Yet everything is a trap. It turns out that Deckham is the real terrible person, and the president knows nothing about it. As a result, he attempts to shoot Max for knowing too much. Max is able to escape through a back door, meets with Sarah and informs her that a storm will destroy everyone here, implying that Deckham will perish. Get rid of all of the presidential candidates at once. He handed Max command of the Dutch boy and instructed him to employ Jake on purpose in the hope that the brothers' frequent squabbling would prevent them from seeing. The fact is their only option is to abduct the president, so Max proceeds to prepare a car. Sarah fires in the air, claiming she saw someone in the crowd going to shoot Palma. When Sarah and another security official accompany the president, emergency protocols are implemented. Yet while they're alone in a corridor, Sarah knocks out the bodyguard and orders Palma to accompany her. Max hijacked a self-driving automobile. The geostorm reaches Earth as everyone on the station is evacuating. Tornadoes smash Bombay. A catastrophic heat wave hits Moscow, and a mega tsunami hits Japan. Dubai. A lightning storm strikes Florida, and Max and Sarah are able to get the president out safely before the stadium is demolished. Deckham also escapes in time and sends his men after Palma. Max is telling the complete truth to whom. Sarah had to drive like hell to avoid the lightning, the ruined roadways, as well as the gunfire fired by Deckham's forces. Because there isn't much time left, Sarah chooses to drive backwards to shoot at the majority of the males, then collides with their automobile. The automobile, when struck by lightning, it flips and explodes. Deckham hands a rocket to his bodyguard nearby, launcher to shoot at the president's vehicle. When the missile strikes its target, the automobile explodes. Nevertheless, Sarah comes behind Deckham and grabs him. She took advantage of the self-driving technology, make the automobile drive and set up the trap for Deckham. The cops are on their way to capture him. Deckham attempts to convince Palma that he did it to get rid of their enemies and that he does not consider it genocide, because science is basically playing God, and he believes Jake would agree because he invented such a thing. First and foremost, a powerful machine. Max becomes upset after hearing his sibling being humiliated. Deckham should be punched. The news begins to report all of the natural disasters and the lack of response from the government. Hannah is worried about Dutch boy. Jake decides to stay in the hotel as the last shuttle departs station, so the reboot must be performed manually. Fassbinder tries to remain as well, but Jake sends her out. Away. Palma, meanwhile, is transported to the Kennedy Space Center and quickly triggers the kill codes. Nevertheless, because the self-destruct procedure cannot be reversed, the brothers must utter, with tears, "I said farewell." After all these years, they reconcile, and Max swears to look after Hannah. As the station continues to burn, Jake rushes to put on his astronaut suit and attempt to reach it. But the door refuses to accept his code. Thankfully, he is taken aback when he discovers Fassbinder. She did stay behind, and she knows another way out. They work together to get to the computer and manually reboot. Fassbinder removes the malware as Jake turns off the satellites. The Geostorm was successfully stopped. The room bursts at that point, as well as Jake and Fassbinder. Outside, he was left dangling. Jake witnesses the demise of his creation and realizes that a satellite remains. So they let the blast wave force them in that direction. The pair successfully enters. But suddenly, the station finishes destroying itself, and NASA loses touch with them, making it impossible for them to continue. Control the spacecraft to return it. A Mayday symbol pops up on the screen unexpectedly. Pattern. It turns out that the explosion drove the satellite away, implying that Jack and Fassbinder are satisfactory. One of the evacuation shuttles returns to take them up, and a few hours later, they arrive. Everyone has returned to Earth safely. Max and Jake reconcile, and they have their first embrace in years. Jake, Max, and Hannah go fishing 6 months later and find it uninteresting, finally realizing why their father never kidnapped them in the first place. Jake will return to space in a week to construct a new habitat station and wishes to spend one more beautiful moment with his family, but he pledges to return.